Let's listen to this progression. The chords are as follows: D, F over D, G over D, and G minor over D. One measure of each. Sounds typical. A lot of common moves here. That's why we're studying these slash chords and these progressions to get you acclimated to the common usage of triads over different bass notes. All right, look at your accompanying diagrams and charts. The layout of this, you'd have a D chord and then F over D. Now I'm putting the bass note in. On the track, you have a track that has bass and drums, so that D is already in place for you. So if you look at your diagrams 8A through 8F, you will see all of your triads and arpeggios plotted out in red because those are the foundation notes. So you could pick any of the notes, and I'm going to demonstrate this in just a minute. We've done this with the previous progressions. But that would mean you'd have a D chord in a lot of different positions, right? You have your cage system, the one note per string arpeggios, and that way you can just play any kind of D chord you want, any inversion. And if you don't know about your inversions, let's do a quick overview of that. A D chord would be 1, 3, 5 in the key of D. D is 1, F sharp is 3, A is 5. If the D is the lowest note, you're in root position. If the F sharp is the lowest note, you're in first inversion. If the A is the lowest note, you're in second inversion. Okay, when you play over that D chord, you're going to use D mixolydian, but we're going to cover that a little bit later. Let's look at some of these voicings of chords, and I'm going to play along with the track that's just bass and drums, and I'll demonstrate this. But let's lay out a couple of chords. Let's say you see this D chord, then you need an F chord. Now you could just move up to capture your F over D just by using an F fingering and just stay off the bass notes. So you could play D, F. But to hear this, now do you hear how it's D minor 7? The F over D would be viewed harmonically as a D minor 7. You could also think of it as an F6 and third inversion. There are advantages to thinking that way. I'll talk about that in a couple minutes. Then we need G over D. Well, you're just using this C form, so here's a D, here's an F, here's a G. But if you keep the D bass under it, see, I just put the D bass over here on the 6th string. Then you're going to need a G minor over a D bass. Well, there are a couple ways we could do this. We could go up here to a G minor, just put the 6th string D note in there, or you could go to your G minor out of your EDCAG system. But you have the track that's just bass and drums, and that allows you to comp using all your different triads and learn the rotations of these. I'm going to play against the track that's just bass and drums and play the triads, the D, F, G, and G minor triads, just to demonstrate how you should approach mastering these chord voicings. I'm playing on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th strings. So that's that area. Now I'll move up to my next inversion. D, F, G, and G minor. Now I'll move up to the D up here, the F, the G, the G minor. Now I'll go to the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd strings, because when you played on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th strings, you simply moved each note in the chord up to the next note in the chord to get your next inversion. Or you would see it out of the chord forms from the cage system and the EDCAG system. Okay, so here we're going to go to the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd strings, starting with the D chord. Then the F, then the G, the G minor. And you can see these right out of your arpeggios. They're all plotted out in red. Now I'll go to the next inversion of my D chord, then the F, the G, G minor. Next inversion. Okay, so there we ran through all the inversions on the first, second, and third strings, the second, third, and fourth strings. Now you could do it on the lower strings also, but I'm not going to cover those. You can work that out on your own. It's a little low in pitch, low in register. It has an effect, so make sure you learn them in the rotation of each string group, each 3 adjacent string group. First, second, and third, second, third, and fourth, third, fourth, and fifth, and finally the fourth, fifth, and sixth. And that way you'll see these triads in all the different positions. And this is going to pay off not only in your rhythm playing, but in your lead playing. Okay, now let's say I want to embellish this progression. Now I see that on each of these chords, if I do the analysis, which is already laid out for you, the D chord, we're treating it as the 5 chord in the key of G, because we're going to play D mixolydian. Then you start to ask the question, what other tones could I add in if I'm comping? And likewise, that transfers over to your soloing. Translates right into your note selection over in that arena. If I know that I'm going to play D mixolydian over a D chord, my scale is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, then back to the 1, because it's a G scale from D to D. Or you can think of it as a D major scale with a flat 7. There's a 2 in there, the E note. So that means that I can sit there and play a D and use a sus2 to 3 move, or I can add the 9 on each of those inversions. So I want to go through this with you. Let's stay on the first 3 strings just for the sake of explanation here. Here you have your D chord. A lot of different fingerings you can use. For you guys that have seen my videos, you know how I like to just look at everything with every possible fingering. If I have this D chord, I can add the 9 in there a couple different ways. I can raise the root a whole step. I can also just create a sus2 move where I drop the 3 down to the 2. You want to learn that in all 3 inversions. So let's go up. That was a second inversion D triad. Let's go to the root position D triad. The rules as follows. You can raise the root a whole step to get your 9. Or you can drop the 3 down to the 2. So technically what you're doing in this case is you have a D and then a D sus2. Okay, let's go to your first inversion triad, which means this F sharp is the lowest voice, the third of the chord. I can drop that 3 to a 2. Now these are moves that I've actually shown in other progressions, but we're going to apply them on this tune. Then I can raise the root on the first string. Now what I'm going to do is play just over the D chord, because I can understand the challenge when the chords are moving. If you try to play along and capture all 4 different slash chords, it might be too much information. Let's do a little workout where we're going to play over the drums and bass track. It's just pumping that D in the bass, and go through and play these moves where you're either playing a sus2 to a major move or the add 9 back to the major move. And I'll go through each of these. That was on the first 3 strings, then we'll talk about the ones on the second, third, and fourth strings. Remember, these are coming right out of these arpeggios that you have in front of you on your diagrams. So here we go. You notice that sometimes I used fingerings that you may not be accustomed to. Let's explore this. For example, when you're playing the D down here, second inversion, looks like a triangle. We've all learned it like this when we were young, right? Now you could play that a lot of different ways. If I was playing it obviously up and I'd have to finger the D chord with my second, fourth, and third fingers, and then my first finger. But make sure you practice it with a cross finger. Now up there, it's really cramped, but there'll be other keys where that'll be beneficial. There are other little tricks you can do. That's a little advanced where you're rolling your third finger. The problem with that is it gets a little crowded and you have to retain that A on the third string. So there's just some fingering options. But then you also have this. You see how I'm using my second and third fingers on the A and the D notes respectively. And my first finger. Do you see what that fingering allows you to do? You get those beautiful legato slides, so it isn't so staccato and so much like a piano where you're just playing one note and then another. Okay, and you might as well watch your intonation. Obviously with lighter strings you have real struggle on some of these things, but and that violin vibrato is really nice. Put a little shimmer on things. So that was with the second inversion voicing, right? Let's look at the root position voicing. The fingerings on this, it could be 2, 3, 1, then you just reach over your fourth finger. Or if you've got the 2. Look what I'm doing there. Here I have the D sus2, D, E, A, fingered 2, 1, 1, and then I'm just doubling the 2, the E. But then, so you can play around, juggle these notes in a lot of different ways. You could also play that with a cross finger. That second and third fingers. The problem with that is it pushes your ring finger up onto the fret so you can get a muffled note right there. It's tough to stay behind the fret. That wouldn't even work up in the higher positions unless you got some pretty skinny fingers. Okay? One of my favorite fingering approaches is those jazz double stops, we'll call them. Excuse me. Where you're pressing down 2 strings in the same fret, 2 adjacent strings with the same finger. Now see, I'm able to do that without having to collapse my second finger DIP joint, depending upon what guitar I have and the string spacing and things like that. And some of the scallop necks with the real big frets, they're so slippery that to get them secure, I'll have to come in like that. But your challenge is you've got to clear the first string. When you hyperextend that finger, it can really get close to deadening the first string. So if you possible, get... And don't forget to practice. Now, if those things, if you can't do those at all right now, just start working on them. You know, it might take a few years, but the benefits far outweigh the challenges. I mean, all the struggles with it. I mean, it just allows you to do so many things. And it helps you play more in tune because you're not sitting here contorting things with 2 fingers in the same fret and twisting around. You're just coming in and real. All right, let's go up to our first position D triad, where we have the third and the bass. First inversion, excuse me. Okay, you've got an unusual move if you're not accustomed to it. You're having to hyperextend and bar your second finger over the A and the D notes, the 5 and the 1. Then your third finger is going to play the third, the F sharp. You can see this coming right out of your D chord, right? Then your E, the 9, is right there on the third string, right? And then you've got the, you know, you saw me when I was playing along with the track, I switched and used this finger. But there's no reason to do that if you don't want to. And I want to stress something. When you learn these chord voicings that I'm showing you, these little harmonic moves, licks if you want to call them, make sure that you learn the numbers and that you have a point of reference. Like right here, you see it over something that I'm sure you're solid on already. A 6-string rooted E form, major chord, right? Comes right out of the cage system. So you would say, all right, I have this first inversion, and notice I've got labels for everything. I didn't come up with them, it's music, so why not learn the labels? There's a first inversion, major triad. Doesn't matter what key I'm in, does it? Right? Practice fingering it different ways, whatever you need. Then you look at it this way. You say, okay, here's the 3, so a whole step lower is always the 2. It doesn't matter what key you're in, does it? You just move it around. Likewise, 1 to 2 is always a whole step. And then you've got something solid. And then you want to look at... You've got something you can build off harmonically for your comping, your rhythm playing, but also for your soloing. And do that with each one of these. But make sure that you always see them over one of the chord forms coming out of your cage system. When you go back here on the root position triad, remember that was coming out of your A form. 5th string rooted A form. When you saw the second inversion, D triad down here, that's coming out of 2 forms, either the C form or out of your D form. And likewise, when you play that's coming out of the A form right there, but then you can also see part of it is coming out of your G form. So make sure you see how all these 5 forms interlock. If you don't have the cage crack system, the video, make sure you get it because it really clarifies and lays out all this information in a very logical and appropriate manner. It also links your pentatonics, so that's the end of the commercial. No more commercials. All right, so that took care of our D chord on the first 3 strings. And this ran a little longer than I thought it would. So quickly, let's go through the triads on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th strings, adding in that 2. Go back here. We have a D triad, F sharp A D, first inversion, right? So I know that here's the 3rd. What did you just learn a minute ago? Well, 2 is always a whole step lower than 3. Or I can raise the root. So that's what I'll be playing against the track. Then we go to our, what comes after first inversion? 2nd inversion. All right. There it is, coming right out of that, either the A form or the G form of your cage system. So I can either go... It's a bit crowded. If you want to put all 3 fingers in that 1 fret, be my guest. I personally hate that stuff because my fingers are too flat on the end, so I'll use a harmonic finger roll right there. Or I'll finger it with my smaller fingers. I'll do a lot of playing where I just work with the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th fingers. I mean, one of the reasons as I get older, they're just getting wider and flatter on the end, you know. So I can just fit in there a little more easily. But it also works the weak side of your hand. Then, here's raising the root to the 9th. Or the 2, they're synonymous. Then we go over here to our root position D triad. Notice how I'm fingering it with my 2nd, 3rd, and 4th fingers. You probably would finger it 1st, 2nd, and 3rd because you're seeing it come right out of here. But remember, you want to see it with every possible finger. Even something like this where we use a crossbar. Doesn't work up there very well, but in a lower key, it works well. Okay? Now, I've covered these moves in other videos, and it might seem redundant, but you know, these are very important for your comping and for licks and things. So there's a 2-3 move, and then if I want to raise the root up, then I have to refinger it with the 1st, 2nd, 3rd. Okay? So that's it on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th strings. I am not going to, well, maybe I will. Real quick, I'll demonstrate it on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th strings. Here we have root position, so I have that E to F sharp move on the 4th string, or if I want to capture the razor. That's a bit stretched out. So all I'm doing is I'm taking the bottom 3 strings of this C form, D major chord, right there, root 3rd, 5th. I'm fingering it with my 3rd, 2nd, and 1st fingers, and I'm also barring over to capture the 4th string. That way I can move from E to F sharp, right there, 2, 3, or I can also raise the root up, so there I'm playing E, F sharp, A. And that would be the whole D add 9. Okay, first inversion. Here I have a G form out of it. Make sense? I didn't explain it. By now you know what I'm doing, right? Then we go to our 2nd inversion triad. Now here's a case where I don't like it because it's too cramped up there, so I would probably go... I might even do some... You know, if I'm up in that higher register, I'd probably move it over to a string group to put it lower on the neck, but if I like that timbre, that sound of those strings up middle of the neck. And I have to tell you, some of my guitars, like I said, the scallop necks with the big frets, some of these things don't work as well because the strings just want to slip right out from underneath you. It's kind of like skating on ice or something. And I don't ice skate. So that's probably what I would look like, slip right out from underneath myself. All right, so those are, and by the way, those same three forms would be identical on the bottom three strings. You know that because all those strings are tuned 5 frets apart. I'm going to finish off this segment of this lesson in our rhythm playing by putting these 2 to 3 or 1 to 2 moves in application against the jam track that's just bass and drums. And I suggest you do this before you go any further on this particular lesson. Make sure you can play and comp against the track just with the D chord. Then we're going to cover the rest of the chords in our next segment. So here we go, along with the track. Starting low. Next string group. Next string group.